Thanks very much, Frank. Thanks. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here, despite the weather. That's okay. I went jogging a little bit in the rain today. Not for too long. So my presentation is really into two parts. The first part is going to talk about the basics and the fundamentals of the blockchain, the way I like to explain it. I know many of you are already into the blockchain and you have a good knowledge of it, but I like to explain it in a particular way so I can bring everybody up to speed. And the second part is going to be about where I think it's going and the use cases that I see that are important, and then some ideas for you to move forward with your own initiatives. And then we'll leave some room for questions and a discussion after all that. Are they free to tweet, Frank, the presentation? Not, right? They can tweet anything about the presentation? If they wanted to tweet, there's nothing private, right? They can tweet. Okay, so everything I say is on record, and no secrets. Everything can be taken and republished. And when did they get a copy of my book, Frank? Did you all get a copy of my book or not yet? After. So you have to listen, and then maybe, do they all get a copy?
Yes.
All right, excellent.
That was a secret.
It was a secret. So we have to thank the German government, or, yeah, for part of the, okay, great. So, as a starting point, what is the blockchain? And do I have to turn this on, or supposed to turn on? So, let's turn it on. Okay, I can use the cursor unless this can be turned on. Okay, I'll use the cursor until you can fix this for me. Thank you. So the way I like to explain the blockchain is that it is a new technology that is enabling the peer-to-peer transmission of electronic value. You see, I didn't say money here because money is just one form of value. And we have to think that money is just one of the applications of the blockchain. And the important thing is that here, this is being done without an intermediary in the middle. So that theme is going to come back and come back again, something that I'm going to reiterate. And to really understand the basics of the blockchain, you have to understand the history of how this came along. How many of you know about the Byzantine generals problem? Or have heard about it? Just a few hands, 20% approximately. It's a very important historical fact that I think allows one to really understand what the blockchain is about from a technology perspective. And the Byzantine generals problem is a fictitious problem that in the realm of technology that posed the following problem. Imagine there's about 9 generals surrounding a hill, and they have to attack a village, and they have an army of 500. But the commanding general has to give the command to each one of the 9 generals on the ground as far as the time of the attack. And the only way to do that is by sending a message from one to another with a messenger. But the problem is that one of these, or many of these generals, could be traitors, it could be lying, it could be changing the content of the message. So the challenge was, how do you make sure that there is integrity of the message? Because if the messenger takes the message, takes it to the second or third general, and if the general can change the time, instead of 9 o'clock, let's say 8 o'clock, then the whole attack is going to be disturbed, and that's not going to work. So the way that to address this, they said, what if every general has to write for 10 minutes a long message, and then enclose the time of the attack, and then send it to the messenger. And the next general, when they receive the message, they also have to spend 10 minutes writing their own message and enclose the content of the previous message in that message. And that's the only way it's going to work. That's the only way that the messenger is going to take the message. And suppose now the 4th general wants to cheat. What will they do? they have no choice but to rewrite all of the previous messages of the other 3 generals. And if they did that, it would take them more than 10 minutes. And that messenger has a rule that if the message is not ready in 10 minutes, they have to leave. So they will ignore that message. And that is really the concept of the Bitcoin blockchain. That is why you probably have heard every 10 minutes, all the transactions are validated and everybody gets up to speed on the validity of the transactions. So that's kind of the history of how Bitcoin came to solve that problem by doing this, kind of solving this, in this case, it's a mathematical problem. It's a mathematical equation that is given to computers. When you hear about miners, what do miners do? They solve this mathematical equation that allows the transactions to be validated. And that is really the essence of the Byzantine generals problem that the Bitcoin blockchain solved initially in 2008 by the famous paper of Satoshi Nakamoto, which was then put into production in 2009, and then the rest is history. So I want you to think of the blockchain as this new era that started maybe in 2015 and compare that to the era of the web that we've had for the last 20 years. And if you think about it, what did the web give us, really? It was mostly about moving information from one place to another. And the basic atomic unit of the web is what? Is the website. That is really part of it. And it's really it was about email, about e-commerce, publishing, social interactions. And now the new wave, maybe for the next 20 years, is going to be the era of the blockchain that is based on the decentralization of trust and having value flow without intermediary. So what was the missing element of the web that the blockchain brought that did not exist at the native level? So the web was about information, and the blockchain is about money. Money was not a native part of the web. If you think about it, you're going to tell me, what are you talking about, William? We have the banks. We can send and receive money, right, from one person to another, but we are using the banks, really. The banks led us to believe that we needed them. They led us to believe that we needed their trust to move money around. So they are the intermediaries that we need. But in reality, what do when I want to move money from one person to another? They make an update to their database. So how does the financial system work today? It's a bunch of databases connecting with each other and synchronizing with each other. That's why there are so many delays when we send transactions with banks, especially if you do a wire transfer, for example. It's one database waiting to connect and synchronize with another database, and sometimes there's 3 other databases in the middle if SWIFT is involved. So that is really the issue. But with the blockchain, that became really a basic unit. Moving money now is very organic. It's something that is done from one person to another without having any intermediary. How many of you have an account on an exchange, on a Bitcoin exchange? That's good. I would say 60%. So those that don't, you have to have that. You have to have experienced what it is to send Bitcoin or Ethereum or any cryptocurrency from one person to another and to receive it in 10 minutes or less. Either if you send it, you get an acknowledgement, or if you receive it, then you see the money right there in your wallet, in your account, instantaneously. There's no delays in the middle. That's a very important factor. So really the 4 things that the blockchain brought to us together that we did not have before at the same time. Game theory, because that scenario I gave you about the Byzantine generals problem is like a game, but it's game theory that is very solid, that has economic incentives. And the incentives are such that if somebody wants to attack, the cost of attack is a lot greater than any reward, so that it is mitigated. The attacks are mitigated by making it very economically expensive to get any benefit. That's why the Bitcoin blockchain and any bona fide blockchain is very resilient, because the first thing they work on is the economic incentive model. This resiliency, this Byzantine fault tolerance, that's called. And minute after the minute, every transaction is being validated. Second is cryptography science. It's very important. It's part and parcels of the blockchain construct. And cryptography is used in 3 different places. First, to secure the identity of every participant, whether it's a computer, a node, whether it's a person, whether it's an entity. There are keys, secure keys, that are identifying that person. Second is in the transmission of the data. So every time there is information going from one place to another, there is encryption in there, and very high-level encryption. And thirdly, in the storage. When you store the data, it is also encrypted. So that did not exist before at those 3 levels in traditional web applications or enterprise applications. Thirdly, there is the issue of decentralization, and it's important because it's an important philosophical and political part of the blockchain. And it's important because that's how blockchains are governed. So the governance aspect of the blockchains are about decentralization. And again, that's a theme that's going to come back and come back. Whatever you're doing that is blockchain related, if there is no decentralization aspect, then you're not really taking advantage of the blockchain as a whole. And fourthly, it's the peer-to-peer infrastructure, because really it's about computers connecting with each other. So in the same way as, again, back to the analogy of the 9 generals, they are like nodes. They are what the Bitcoin computers are doing, validating the mathematical equation. But now there are thousands of them, close to 10,000 for Bitcoin and over 16,000 for Ethereum. So it's another new network there of computers connected with each other in a peer-to-peer manner. And that peer could be a computer, could be a person as well. So the infrastructure here is part of the blockchain topology. And these are very important factors. So having said what I've said to you now so far, what do you think is the most important thing that the blockchain disrupts from a technology perspective? From a technology perspective, what is the one thing that the blockchain disrupts at the heart of it? The database. The database. It's really another form of database. 3 years ago, when I started to write about the blockchain, one of the first articles I wrote, the headline was, the blockchain is a new database. Get ready to rewrite everything. Of course, I was exaggerating a little bit, but that's the idea. Because that is really now, we have a new way of handling information that does not need a database. Because databases are very complex. They have to coordinate with each other. And that is where a lot of the delays happen. Whereas with the blockchain, is one ledger. So you go from multiple databases and headaches about integrating them to one single ledger, one single spreadsheet, one single entry, one single ledger of many entries that you cannot change, but you can program. So one simple way of thinking of a blockchain is a programmable spreadsheet. That's really what it is. It's a bunch of values, and you can program it. But once you put a value in there, once you make the change in the state, that's it, you cannot change it anymore. You just make another entry below it. So there is a historical record that is permanent. That is one of the features of the blockchain. Let's talk about 7 areas of disruption for the blockchain, and then we'll go into what it means. So first of all, the first area of disruption is cryptocurrency, because the Bitcoin is really the first application of the blockchain. When I go around and talk to people and I tell them, well, have you heard of the blockchain? And this is like the average person on the street or anywhere I meet. And more often than not, still, people say, no, I don't know what the blockchain is. What is it? I never heard of it. But then when I say, have you heard of Bitcoin? And they say, yes, of course, they heard of Bitcoin. But then I tell them, well, Bitcoin is one application of the blockchain. Blockchain is the technology behind Bitcoin. So when we think of cryptocurrency, it's only one application of the blockchain. And because of the cryptocurrency, now we have a lot of derivative products in the financial services industry that are based on cryptocurrency specifically. So many of you, how many of you go here to CoinMarketCap? How many times a day do you go? Every 5 minutes, right? Every 5 minutes. Of course, that's where you go and check what the currencies are doing. This is from yesterday, and we're over $210 billion of market cap. Exactly a year ago, it was about $10 billion. So it gives you an idea where the value creation is being done, is being made right now. So there's incredible wealth right now. Still, I mean, $210 billion is not a lot in the grand scheme of the financial services transactions, but still, it is something that started almost at zero, and now it is that much. But it's not just about currency, it's about derivative products based on currency. Talk about index funds. I run my own index fund called WMX on the iEconomy platform, and there are others that are being created. There are derivatives now. The CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, has announced that they will be having Bitcoin derivatives by the end of the year. Capital market, the whole capital market segment, which is billions and billions, $1.4 quadrillion every year, is all over the blockchain. Why? Because I want to reduce the time between the clearance and the settlement of funds. Today you hear about T+3 or T+2, and it's going to T+1 in some cases, but here with the blockchain, it could be instantaneous. The delays between clearing and settlement costs money, because money is not settled until the money is settled, and you're really waiting for it to be in your pocket. Another application which relates to real estate is the tokenized ownerships of a fractional part of let's say, of a building. So this building, for example, if it has one, it can have one owner, or it could have multiple owners. What if they say 50% of this building, we're going to divide it up and sell 1,000 ownership tokens, and we make that liquid? That is the innovation, really. Fractional ownership is not new. We've had that called REITs, R-E-I-T. But now making it liquid in a form that is easy, that is going to be new. So the whole real estate industry is all over the blockchain right now, and you'll be hearing of ways to tokenize big buildings and real estate assets, and any asset basically could be tokenized now to have a liquid state. The distributed ledger, we also hear about the fact that, well, the enterprises like you to call blockchain DLT, distributed ledger technology. And here's why, because when the blockchain came along, as any big company does, they kind of don't like everything about it. So they say, well, we like this, but we don't like that. So the banks, when they saw Bitcoin, because Bitcoin was a public network, the banks are regulated, so they cannot use a public network. So they have to use a private network or networks that they partially own. So they said, well, we don't like this Bitcoin thing because it's public. But we like the blockchain, the technology behind it, the distributed ledger technology. And a lot of the banks' projects are really based on DLT, not really about cryptocurrency per se. It's about settling bilateral or multilateral agreements between them. Because banks don't trust each other, really, but they need to do business with each other. So the blockchain can help in removing the intermediaries in the middle, the custodian banks and other counterparties that exist today between the banks. Decentralized protocols. So now Bitcoin or the blockchain is a base protocol, but there are also other vertical protocols that are being built on top of the base one. So think any vertical application, peer-to-peer commerce, cloud computing, decentralized trading. Decentralized trading is going to be a thing. It is happening. There are companies like ZeroX and Melonport that are working on doing exchanges, like exchanging assets, stocks, and cryptocurrency without an exchange in the middle. We have been used to having always an exchange in the middle, whether it's the New York Stock Exchange or any other exchange. That is going to be not needed in the future. At least a big part of the trading is going to be done from peer to peer. So you put the order in what is called a off-chain relay, but the execution is done on-chain, and the settlement is done within minutes, if not seconds. Or you can have decentralized cloud computing. In the case of decentralized peer-to-peer commerce, disclosure, I am an investor and on the board of OpenBazaar, but that is it is one of the most prominent consumer-type blockchain application that you can try today. When people ask me, how can I get involved in the blockchain and Bitcoin, aside from just putting some money into an exchange, I'll tell them one of the things you can do is you can sign up to OpenBazaar. It's like eBay without eBay. eBay has listing fees, and eBay has credit card fees. So what if we had free commerce, no fees, and a single currency, Bitcoin? Imagine, there's no need to exchange now. So that's what OpenBazaar is doing, and they have tens of thousands of downloads now, and you can just download it. They have an iPhone app, and you can try it. You can sell and buy anything from anywhere to anywhere. Proving that something exists, proof of X, I call it. This is in the book. The blockchain is an excellent record-keeping environment. Once you record something on it, that's it. It's there forever. So one application, for example, is land registry. So when the title is being recorded for a particular house or building or asset, then why not do it on the blockchain and you have a historical record? And it is something that can be proven. It cannot be tampered with. Many countries have very fraudulent practices for land registry. Not so much in the Western world, where this is pretty much under control, but still, there's cost involved, and there are delays involved in checking that if you're trying to sell something, that you are indeed the owner. I wrote another article last year called, the headline was, let me back up for a second. Today, when we want information, what do? We Google for everything, right? And that is the standard way of checking for things. But in the future, we're going to go on blockchains to check the veracity, to check the truthfulness, to check the existence, to check the facts, the records. Did this happen at this particular moment? Does this person own this? Is this true? Is this not true? When did it actually happen exactly, at what time? So we're not going to go on to Google. Maybe it's going to be something else. It's going to be another type of service or many services where you go and check these things, proving X. So I wrote an article last year, and the headline was, the blockchain is the next Google. And then the next day, I got a call from Google. And they emailed me and they said, well, can you come and tell us what you're talking about? So I went there and I talked to them about it. But that is really what is going on right now. Smart contracts, it's another big area of the blockchain that's very important. What are smart contracts? It's really business logic. And we've had business logic for a long time. And there has been business logic languages for a long time. But the difference here is that this is business logic with money attached to it. We have not had business logic with money in an organic manner, meaning anybody can write a little program that says, if this, then that. It's really if this, then that. But then the that could be then transfer money. We can have a wager between me and Frank and say, well, tomorrow it's going to stop raining in Hamburg. And it's a bet. And if I win, you give me a Bitcoin. If I lose, I give you a Bitcoin. But we can put that into a smart contract, automatically linked to our accounts. And the smart contract will automatically check the weather in what is called an oracle. So oracles are like information sources that know about the weather. It could be sports results, anything. And automatically that thing is done. So we don't have to worry about it. So a lot of esports, a lot of gaming companies are going to have these kinds of arrangements on the blockchain. And this, I mean, it's good and bad because you can write a bad smart contract that can be a disaster. And you've heard some, there has been some disasters recently, like the Parity client, somebody locked $100 million because they wrote a bad smart contract. Or the DAO was full of bugs in their smart contracts, and some bad things happened. Somebody came and hacked on it. So it's kind of good and bad. You can write a bad program, but now the consequences is not just a bug. The consequences of writing something bad is a bug with money lost or money locked. So it comes with a responsibility. Token-based models. Tokens are a very big topic today. Maybe it's taking a little bit too much prominence, more than I'd like to, because we're a little bit overshooting what we can do with tokens, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit. A very simple way to describe a token is a cryptocurrency with a purpose, a special purpose. That's one simple way to define it. So suppose all of you that came here to the conference, suppose that as you came in, we gave you a token. It could be a token, really, literally. I had one in my other jacket. A token that only lets you do three things. Get coffee or tea, eat, and then use the restrooms, and that's it. But if you don't have the token, you cannot do this. But that's kind of one example of, now imagine now we're doing this on the cryptocurrency side, on the blockchain, online, and that's what it is. It's really a special purpose. But now, how do we use that is the important thing. So earlier this year, I organized the Token Summit in New York in May, and that was a big success. And all we wanted to talk about is the models behind tokens. So I'm not so worried. I don't really care about the price of cryptocurrency, the price of tokens. What I really am interested in is what you can do with the tokens, the business models that the tokens can enable. That is the important thing. And really what this is about, it's about creating what I call circular economies. It's about the future of work. So imagine that not only you can be given a token because you bought a ticket, what if you can earn a token just by doing something? Just by doing something. If you think about it, the average person spends an hour per day on Facebook. And what do we get in return? We give them our attention, right? We spend minutes, hours, sometimes more, and we get nothing in return. What do? They take our eyeballs, they aggregate that, and they resell it as advertising, and they make all the money, and we just spend time, and we interact with our friends, obviously. But Facebook is the only one making money here. We're not, but we're spending time. We're giving them our attention. What if this was reversed? In the blockchain world, your attention is worth something. There's a company called Steemit. How many of you have been on Steemit? 20%? That's not bad. If you go on Steemit, it's like a decentralized Reddit. It's a content marketplace. If you spend time and publish something, you earn tokens. You earn Steem. If somebody upvotes your content, if they make comments on it, you earn Steem. So you're earning tokens because of your time. And then you can also spend that money. You can spend those Steem dollars by voting other content or by promoting your content. So it becomes a earning and spending kind of economy. But that kind of earning doesn't have to be active. This is kind of active work because you've done something. It could be passive. Maybe we are giving data. Maybe you are giving your healthcare data. Maybe you are giving away your habit data, where you go from one place to another. All of this could be valuable. What if somebody gave you a token for the data that you give, and they give you back something in return that is more valuable? So that's the future. I think this is the future of work. The blockchain represents the future of work. Because work now is going to be something where you get compensated on. It is not something that you just do for free if you're spending time online. I like to give this analogy. We all have 3 jobs. Did you know that? The first job is probably the job that you know about, and the one that you go to the office for, or you get paid for at the end of the month or 2 weeks. That's your regular job. The second job you have is taking care of yourself, taking care of your home, housekeeping, cleaning, doing the dishes, taking care of your spouse or relatives. That's your second job. And the third job was a job that was given to us by anybody online. whether you go and book your own ticket, travel ticket, or you make a reservation at a restaurant, or you call a taxi. All of these are jobs that were given to us. But nobody's paying us for these jobs. That's the third job. With the blockchain, we'll be able to get paid for the third job. So we're going to have work tokens, I call them, and currency tokens, and they will all interrelate with each other. ICOs, initial cryptocurrency offerings, that's the big reason why the market capitalization of the cryptocurrency that I showed you in the previous slide has been going up and up and up. There's close to 1,200 cryptocurrencies today. And in the last 12 months, approximately close to 200 new ICOs came to the market and raised $3 billion. That is more than the amount of money that is going into startups from traditional venture capital firms and angel and seed type funding. For the first time in June, that how much money is going into ICOs has exceeded the money that has been going traditionally from seed capital and angel capital combined. So this was a very important turning moment. We can go to any place that can track these ICOs, but it doesn't come without a risk if you invest in it. And really what it's changing, it's changing the nature of venture capital. But I think it's changing it temporarily. Right now we're in a bit of a heat moment in the ICO space. I expect things to change. Many of these charts, if not all of them, are either in the book or on my blog. I blog regularly, so I encourage you to go on startupmanagement.org/blog, and you will find a lot of these slides there. And we're going to give you the final presentation at the end. So the venture capital traditionally has been sitting on the sidelines because there's so much crypto capital out there right now. It's fueling a lot of the ICOs because it's so easy now to raise money. I like to say, well, if you can fog a mirror, you can raise money right now on an ICO almost. It is almost that easy. You just have a white paper, you make a website a little bit pretty, and you put some advisors' names there, and then you raise some money. But now, let's get a bit more technical, a little bit more precise. What is a token now? And it's not, yeah, it is a cryptocurrency with a purpose, but it's really a unit of value that any organization now can create to self-govern its business model. Again, I said to you that the token is about the business model, and that's really what I'm interested in. If you are doing tokens, you have to think about what are you trying to do that is different from before? Are you empowering, and how are you empowering your users to interact with that token, with your product? And how are you sharing the rewards to everybody? Because that's really about decentralization. So if you are doing, how many of you are involved in some token or ICO projects? Not too many, 10%. That's okay. But be careful. Right now there's a lot of euphoria around it, and there's not a lot of scrutiny in terms of whether it's a good ICO or a bad ICO. But I can tell you for a fact, regulation is going to come to this world. Last week, I think the German regulators issued a warning saying that this is risky. And every country is issuing warnings that this is risky. So think of it the following way. A token is not a carrot. I hear a lot of ideas where they want to say, well, we're going to use the token to incentivize users, give them an incentive. So we'll give you like a bribe, or we'll give you a discount. But that's not enough. It's like I give you a coupon, I give you a discount to go get a drink at a bar. So maybe you'll take the coupon and you have one drink. But if you don't like the bar, or if you don't like the drink, you're not going to come back. So what have I done? I've wasted my coupon. I've wasted my that discount. I didn't get anything. And that's the risk with if you just do it as a carrot. There has to be value behind it. There has to be more attachment. There has to be skin in the game. The token must be native to the blockchain. It has to be something that gives more leverage than, oh, I can use it and go, and you'll never see me again. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you have to prove something what I call the token to market fit. In the startup world, there is a theme, there is a expression we call product to market fit. Because startups do not know exactly, are not very sure that the product that they are dreaming about is going to have market acceptance. So they keep iterating until they get market acceptance. And that is called product to market fit. So the same thing is happening now with the tokens. You have to prove that there is a token to market fit. Because at the beginning, it's just a hypothesis. Like any startup, your idea, your strategy is a hypothesis. You have to prove it in the market. And the only way to prove it is by getting users. So raising money on an ICO, saying we're going to have tokens, is only the beginning. It's not the end. It's not success. Success is going to be getting users to use your tokens. And I will say this over and over again, the killer app is not the tokens, it's what the tokens enable. And what the token enable really is designing these economies, private economies. That's what's going on right now. In the past, only governments issued currency, right? Sovereign money is really issued by the governments. But in the future now, companies can issue their own currency. And it's starting to happen now. There's a company I'm involved in called Kik, K-I-K. It's a messaging platform, the 5th largest messaging platform. They are issuing their own currency called KIN, K-I-N. It's going to be the currency for services. And they are creating their own mini economy, their own mini ecosystem with developers, with users that earn and spend that currency inside of the messaging platform. And there's going to be many examples like that. So part of the design of a token-based application, you have to really think about the token functionality. When I get emails from entrepreneurs telling me, well, we're doing this ICO and we're going to do this thing with the tokens, the first thing I ask them is, what is the token functionality? So I wrote a long post, I call it tokenomics. And it's really about trying to understand what is the role of the token. And that is really the essence of it. How hard have you thought about the role of the token? Is it a right? Is it an ownership? Is it a toll? Is it a currency? Does it offer some kind of profit sharing? The role of the token is very important. Your token is part of the product. But again, you have to prove it in the market. You have to prove that it's going to bring customers. It's going to bring users. So in the same way that you have a value proposition, I came up with a token value proposition. You have to think about, what is the token going to do? For whom is it going to be? Who's going to use it? For what purpose? For what benefit? And resulting on, for what? I mean, if you cannot answer and put your own project into this kind of phrase in a very succinct, very believable way, then your token value proposition is weak. So that is what I would challenge you to do. Frank asked me to talk a little bit about ICOs, and this is the end of my slide on the ICOs. So when I look at ICOs, and I evaluate them on 4 different criteria. The first one is still a startup. As a startup, ICOs are not going to erase the startup characteristics. All ICOs are like startups, unless you already are in a current business with the current users. But then your challenge there is to prove the token to market fit. So maybe you have users, but now you're adding the token. So you want to make sure that now the users are going to use the token. Maybe the users used your product before, but now they have to use the token, and that's a challenge. The crypto sale, resiliency, how is it done, the terms, that's important. Number 3, the transparency. That's something that the regulators are going to be all over it. I would expect, if anything is going to happen from the SEC or the other regulators, they're going to require these ICO companies to disclose more information, to register. And right now the information is not available, or at least a lot of it is not available. Who's getting these tokens? What is the lockup periods? How much are the owners taking? How much are they cashing out? How much are you selling? How much are you keeping? all of this is part of the transparency that has to be done. And what's the business model behind it? Very important. Let's keep going and talk about important themes for the blockchain. First of all, there's a gap today between the understanding and the implementation. That's why you're here. You want to understand it so you can implement it. And the more that gap can be closed, the better it is. So keep that in mind. The second thing is that we are moving away from core development to app development. A lot of the first few years, even up to now, to some extent, you hear about developments on Bitcoin, you hear about developments on Ethereum, you hear of new blockchains. All of this is infrastructure, is the core. But for most of you, you're not really involved in that. There are only a few hundred people that can do the core development of the blockchains. Most of you are going to be in the application development. And this is the same as what happened with the internet. And I've been using this slide for like 22 years. It's the same slide, it hasn't changed. We have infrastructure, we have middleware, and we have applications. And I did that for the web. So the web was the infrastructure. Middleware is all the tools that allow us to use the infrastructure and write applications. And the web took off in the early 2000s, when it was more about application and less about infrastructure and less about middleware. So where are we today with the blockchain? I would say we're about maybe 80% into the infrastructure. We're less than 50% into the middleware, because it's not very easy to write applications. And we're maybe 10% into the applications area. When people ask me, like, what are the applications for the blockchain? There aren't too many I can think about. Very few. You can get a wallet, you can go on Steam, you can go on OpenBazaar, and then I stop there. There aren't too many examples. We need more consumer applications, and we need to see more examples of blockchain in use. The part that is missing right now is standardization. I'm going to skip over this slide quickly. But if you think about it, the blockchain is really, could be a number of calls, a number of API calls, a number of application programming interface calls. It is not very easy to program into the blockchain today, but it is getting easier and easier. The reason why the web took off is because of standards. The Java development language, for example, was a standard that came out in 95, and it started to become very popular in 97, and it became the language of the web. HTML was a standard. HTTP is a standard. We need more standards on the blockchain so that we can write things once and deploy them everywhere. And to give you an example as to where we are versus where we should be, how many of you think blockchain developers there are in the world right now, approximately? A few thousand, 50,000 is my estimate right now, 50,000. But that's not a big number. How many Java developers do you think there are in the world? 10 million, about 10 million. So on one hand, you have 50,000 developers. On the other hand, you have 10 million. And Java is important because that's the language of the web. And blockchain is the new language, smart contracts, whether it's Solidity on Ethereum or other types of languages. That's the new proficiency. If you are a developer, or if you have developers working for you, make sure they start to learn some blockchain languages, because that's important. So the next wave of the blockchain is really about innovation, about business models, about really creating new things that are process improvement type initiatives. It's not really about the technology as much. We're not totally there, but that's the mindset that we want to be in. Another requirement is to think about, like, are you really supporting your existing business, or are you creating a new business model? And are you doing it in the public sense or the private sense? So I put this matrix together, and these are just examples of applications in each one of them. But if you're a big company, you're probably not going to disrupt yourself. You're going to use the blockchain to improve something, to make things faster, to make things cheaper, to make things better for your customers. And very few big companies have the ability to disrupt themselves and go into new businesses. But a lot of the excitement on the blockchain side is in doing something totally new in the public setting, that did not exist before, like Open Bazaar. They start with 0 customers. IPFS, Interplanetary File System. It's a new way to store files on the blockchain in a very decentralized manner. They start from 0. And that's really the new frontier. I am very excited about that quadrant, but I'm also quite excited about what the private blockchains and the big companies are doing as well. Then we cannot talk about this without talking about regulation versus innovation, because regulation is a little bit of a murky segment right now. The regulators are a bit in a dilemma. Their dilemma is that they are in charge of local regulation. So the German regulators will worry about Germany. SEC worries about the US, although they can reach anybody in the world. The Canadian ones worry about Canada, but the blockchain is global. So that's their dilemma. How do they regulate something that is global at the local level? So there's still lots of learning. And what I tell them when I talk with them is that they have to innovate as well. It is not just the role of technology to innovate. The regulators need to innovate themselves as well and update their regulations and give us new regulations that are more open-minded. The blockchain, when you start to implement it, yeah, technology is a bit of a stumbling block right now because it's not all clear. But I say this in a kind of joking manner. It's 90% governance and business models, and the other 50% is technical. So yeah, it doesn't add up, but still, I mean, yeah, technical, you just solve it, but you really start with the business. Sometimes it's more difficult to change the business than it is to figure out the technology. Let's move on to use cases and some of the industries that we want to talk about. How are we doing time-wise? 10 minutes, okay, I'll 5, okay. Financial services. Let me move into the, we're going to see some what is called regulatory sandboxes. That's the important thing. So they are trying things, the regulators, the same way that as we are. Watch for capital markets. Challenges. If you're doing this, you have to combine the business, the legal, and the technical aspects. So again, if you just use the blockchain as a technical construct without changing something on the business side, you're not using all of it. There has to be a change on the business side. There has to be some legal aspect that has changed as well. The challenge is that the technology is not mature right now. So what packages do you use? Choice of software. And you have to ask yourself, are you doing this to support your existing model, or are you creating something new? Best practices, do a before and after. When people come to me and they tell me, well, what do you think of this idea on the blockchain? If they don't have a before and after diagram, I'm lost. It takes them half an hour to explain to me what they are trying to do, and I don't give them that time anymore. I just ask, like, do a before and after, because that's really what you are trying to accomplish. What is the blockchain going to allow you to do that is different from before? And that is what you need to talk about. Collaborative spaces are all over, are open. Consortiums, every industry has a challenge to work on projects for their own industry. Look for the pain points, not the gain improvements. It's easier to insert the blockchain when there is a pain. When something is not working, and I tell you, well, I have a solution for you, you're going to be a lot more receptive than if I told you, well, something is working for you, I have something a little bit better. You're not going to be so willing to take the risk. So look for the pains, not for the gains first. Important that we don't just copy what we see, but we try to invent something that we don't see. That's the challenge. It took us a few years on the web before we started to innovate in the 2002, 2004 timeframe to really innovate in the new applications, the two-way communication. We didn't have that before. When you're designing blockchain applications, it's very important to know the balance between on-chain and off-chain. Again, the blockchain is not a big database. People want to put everything on the blockchain. No. The blockchain maybe is 10% of your whole application, but you have to know what 10% that is that you use the blockchain for. Very important. Best practice on the strategy side, there has to be a reward. Again, the token is, if you're using a token, it represents a kind of work. So is somebody earning it? Is somebody working for it? That has to be native. Are you paying for a smart contract, for example? That could be one way of doing it. There has to be an intermediary in the middle whose role is changing. Is there a counterparty? Is there not a counterparty anymore? That's kind of why when you do the before and after, I want to see something changing in the middle there. Are you using a peer-to-peer infrastructure? Are you thinking of decentralization? Are you thinking, and are you going to see the benefits of decentralization? Use cases, very important. I'm using these from a company called Stratum in Paris. Their focus is, they call it proof of process. I'm also on their board, but I use them because they are really one of the most advanced companies I know of that have software that works. And these are real examples. I'm not going to give the names out because some of them are private, but this is a real thing. Insurance. An insurance consortium is using blockchain technology because they don't trust each other, but they need to trust the processes between each other. So what the blockchain does, it solves that. And here, what I'm using, these words are, what are these? These are all pain points. That is what the blockchain is hitting at. Complex contracts, slow enforcement, compliance, lack of consumer choice. Because there are laws now where you can take your insurance and move to another insurance carrier in Europe. But you can do this with databases, but it's complicated. But you can do it on the blockchain, it's easier. These are the real cases that are happening today. Supply chain, this is a big area for supply chain. Tuna supply chain traceability, this is happening right now. They are doing it. Multiple stakeholders, little transparency, provenance, all of this can be put on the blockchain. Siloed information, again, I'm talking about pain points. The blockchain hits at the pain points, that's important. More use cases, this can happen, this can be applied to anything. Critical documents, security documents, traceability of documents, multiple stakeholders. Again, siloed information. The blockchain could be that bus that puts everybody on the same page, and it's available. It's real time. It's all synchronized. You don't have to wait. And that's really, and there's no fraud. Cases of fraud right now are being remedied by blockchain technology because you can check the hashes of the information. There's no duplication. You can check the identity of the originators. You can check the records. It's all immutable. Energy. Energy is another big area for blockchain applications. Let me move on. So that's kind of what I want you to think about. And obviously you're here because you're all positive. You have positive minds for the blockchain. But I can tell you there's lots of headwinds. All of you in this room want to make change happen. But when you go out there in the world, there are lots of people that do not want that change to happen. And I use the Chinese proverb as a closing. When the winds of change blow, some people build walls, but some others build windmill. So I hope that you all will build the windmills. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you very much, William. That was really a great talk. I again learned interesting things. For me, one thing is always important as well. You said, look for the pains and not for the gains. That very well remembers me. I was responsible in 1998, started to build e-commerce Deutsche Telekom. The breakthrough internally was the introduction of DSL, because the only process working was the e-commerce process. The other processes were pain, and then the staff started to understand the potential of e-commerce. Yeah? This is a little bit now the same story as we discussed yesterday as well. No? So you still have 10 minutes for Q&A. So we discussed, Jan and myself, so we have 10 to 15 minutes now still for Q&A. So please put your questions to William. And as William already said, each of you will receive a book. He signed it yesterday. Took half an hour to sign all the books. So you will get it in the meeting rooms. Yeah, please now put your questions. Who has a question to William Mougayar? Okay. We have microphones somewhere, or don't we? No, we only have one. Okay, then I...
Oliver Krause. One of the key challenges I see in the blockchain distributed ledger field is actually governance, because we have as we have seen last week, for example, the SegWit fork, which has been called off, and all that I know is that there were only a few people, exactly 2 people with their own interest, who were basically responsible for that thing to happen. Yeah. So on the one side, we have a paradox, decentralized system, democracy, everything, and then there are only a few players. What do you think about that?
Okay, the issue of governance and decentralized governance in the context of the SegWit Bitcoin fork that happened or didn't happen. Well, we're still learning a lot about governance and the blockchain, and it's not perfect. I wouldn't say to you that Bitcoin governance is perfect or is a model yet. But it works. I mean, it is still there. The Bitcoin network is there. Nobody lost any money. But that's only in the context of the public blockchain. So there are growing pains. It's not ideal. And you can say, well, is this better than the Ethereum governance, which happens in a different way? I'm not sure. I think it's better to have baby steps in the area of governance, and everybody wants to get to decentralized governance where it's all autonomous and it all happens automatically. But when you get to that very quickly, accidents will happen, and that's what the DAO fiasco was last year. They wanted to get to decentralized governance very, very quickly, and accidents happen. I mean, that's. So I caution about people wanting to be doing decentralized autonomous organizations too quickly. It's a stepwise process. We have to learn about it slowly and do it more surely than fast.
Okay, thank you. So, next question. I'm willing to put a question. So there are new developments which even name themselves blockchain without blocks and without chain. You know, I'm speaking about IOTA. You have got developments like Hashgraph. What is your opinion about these new kind of developments? Can you say a little bit about this?
So about the Internet of Things and the... it's going to be a challenge. I'm going to be very honest here. It's going to be a challenge. We have to see adoption. I have not seen adoption yet in the Internet of Things with the blockchain. I mean, there are some use cases here and there, like putting a little device in a car, for example, so that it can be in an electric car to recharge itself when it's stopped at a red light, for example. And actually, I think it was done with a German company. That's one use case, but I want to see many users, and that's the challenge. So some of these, I get worried when they want to boil the ocean and say we are IOTA for everything. We are going to be the billion users, and when I hear things, we're going to solve the unbanked for the billions that are unbanked. I mean, this is boiling the ocean. No company gets to 2 billion users overnight just because you saw 2 billion users that could be using your product. It all comes step by step. So I'm more encouraged by seeing very vertical types of projects that are solving something very specific. Again, in the energy space, there is a street on Brooklyn where they are starting to trade energy, excess energy, between each other, between the homes. So building small grids, for example, energy grids, to have a mini economy of sorts. That's encouraging. That's small. So I prefer small, narrow cases, vertical cases. I think that's how we're going to win this thing, not boil the ocean, a billion users at once.
Okay, thank you very much. So, your last chance for questions. Okay, you again.
How do you see the future of Bitcoin as a real currency or the real currency function?
These are tough questions about Bitcoin. You want me to predict the future of Bitcoin? It's so difficult right now. I mean, there's Bitcoin Cash now. There's, I've stopped trying to predict it because it's very irrational. It is very irrational what's going on. If anybody tries to tell you, well, we're going to have a business, we're going to have an analytical model for evaluating the cryptocurrency or for trying to predict. It's impossible.
I don't talk about the value, I talk about when do people start to use the Bitcoin token for actual payments. Because as a store of value, it's basically not really relevant because it's the price, you have price fluctuation. Same is true for payments.
When are we going to, okay. I see a world of many currencies, not just one Bitcoin currency. So I see a world where your smartphone is going to have many wallets inside of the apps. That is the world we're going to be in. I already have a little bit of it because I'm a little bit ahead and using some other applications. Make sure my smartphone, nobody touches it. There is money in there. Yeah, exactly. So in the apps, every app is going to have a wallet. And that's the future. I see a future where we're going to have multiple currencies. We're going to interact with them almost seamlessly. And right now, Bitcoin is dominant. And it may remain to be dominant because it's kind of the entry point. It's easy because you have to get into the system. And you get into the system either via Bitcoin or via Ethereum. And maybe a third currency, Litecoin or something like that. But that's the entry point. So that's why Bitcoin has a lot of demand. And now Bitcoin Cash is coming into the scene. So we might have 2 or 3 dominant currencies that are like the entry points, the reserve currencies. But there will be many, many different application currencies like Steam, Kin, other ones. Like for every function, there will be a currency. And the challenge for the application developers is to make it easy for us to interact with them so that it's as easy as opening an app. Because we all have apps now on our smartphone. It becomes second nature. Every day we use maybe an average of 5 to 10 apps on a daily basis. We don't think about it twice. But each one of these apps will have a wallet in the future.
Okay, thank you. So okay, you had the first question, and if everybody has a brief question, then we can answer these 3 questions.
Chris Hauf is my name. My question is, you said standards are still missing. What is your idea, do you have an idea what will be the main languages for blockchain?
For blockchain was the 2 words she put later.
The question is what will be the main languages. I don't think we need to necessarily think about the languages per se as the needed standards. What is needed is the interfaces. So typically, the standard is at the interface level, and typically many languages could be interacting with that interface. So when you think about a given implementation, typically there are different languages. It's not really the language. It's really at the interface level. It's how the language interacts with the function of the blockchain. So we have to standardize the functionality to the external world, so that if you want to write in Java, you can do it. If you want to write in Python, you can do it. If you want to write in Solidity, you can do it. You can do it in Haskell, in C++, in other types of languages. So it's not so much the language, but it's more the interface with the functionality, so that many languages can interact with that.
Okay, now the last 2 questions. I will first go back there.
Philip Parker. I have a question concerning the multiple currencies. Are there already concepts talking about bringing different currencies together, or exchanges between different currencies, cryptocurrencies? Because as you said, there will be multiple currencies.
Sorry, so I could sing a song while I'm moving here, but you don't want this.
So the question is, what do we do now with when we have multiple currencies in terms of exchanging? Well, right now it's not so easy to go in and out of different currencies, but it's going to become easier. We have to go through an exchange today. So if I wanted to go from, let's say I have Steam and I want to convert to Ether, or I want to convert them back to dollars or euro, I have to go to the exchange or to the wallet and change something. But it's going to be easier in the future. Again, it's going to be more peer-to-peer exchanging. So it'll be as easy as just pushing a button and then you convert or you use it. So that's the future, is more peer-to-peer trading and less exchanges in the middle. And it is going to be easier. Right now, it's not necessarily easier. It's really more something that you have to know the operation and the intricacies of it.
Thank you. Last question now.
I'm wondering which key issues you see which stop the real market for implementing blockchains right now.
You mean the real economy? Yeah.
Yeah, the real issue is stopping us to implement more. Really, the real issue is, remember my slide about infrastructure, middleware, and applications? I think the weak point right now is middleware. I'd like to see better middleware. Middleware means tools that are easily used by developers to develop the applications. Because not everybody can interact at the infrastructure level. That's really for the very, very kind of technical, very specialized engineers. But we need tools that are easier to write applications. That's why the web, you can open up, go on WordPress, anybody can open up a website, or you don't have to even go on WordPress. You use Squarespace and other types of very easy to use middleware to basically publish on the web. And we're not there yet, and we need more. That's why I give the example of Stratum. We need more packages and application environments that can just get you a lot closer to writing the apps. So that's where I think what's missing right now. And standards could be part of that. So the minute you have standards, you have more adoption, because more users more developers can use that. It's a lot easier. You have more critical mass. The education becomes more widespread. So that's what's missing right now, is to make it more easily accessible.
Thank you very much, William Mougayar. So hopefully we can somewhere invite you again to Hamburg to present all the fantastic business models and the successes we developed within these 2 days. It was a pleasure to have you here, and yeah, all the best for you in the future.
Thank you.